I was at my office just doing my thing. The phone rang late in the evening. Bob, is that you? I said, yeah. And, the Premier would like to speak with you. Mike got on the phone and he said, I hear you know something about numbers. And then he asked me to come up to his office. I came in here, there was really nothing outside. It was just a building, was a warehouse building sitting on the waterfront. The question I was really asked was it possible to hold the Olympics in the Toronto downtown space? And what sort of numbers would be involved? So that's what really Mike asked me to do. And then casually he said, well, Mel is going to pay for part of this. Why don't you go down and speak to Mel? Mel Esmond was the mayor at the time. No one really had an idea of what it is we were, other than we wanted to try to get the Olympics here. That's how this whole thing started. The real fun of this entire project, and it really was fun, the fun of this entire project wasn't really the Olympic Games. What became interesting was actually using the Olympic Games as the nucleus to try to do something that the City of Toronto had been trying to do for well over 100 years. The cities on the Great Lakes system used the Great Lakes as a transportation corridor. And so cities were all built to look inland. And what in essence you had were the worst parts of the city, the docks of the city were all on the waterfront. Modern cities, whether it's in the city we often refer to as Chicago, had actually began turning this city looking towards the lake. And that was the challenge. The City of Toronto had to be reoriented to the lake. And that orientation to the lake had to be done not by the developers, but it had to be led. This entity, which we talked about as the Toronto Waterfront Revitalization Corporation, could be put in place, which would drive a federal agenda. And the federal agenda was the new Canada. I felt at the time that Canada was trying to find its place in the world. Everyone was driving the millennium, the new technologies, the new sustainability issues, but these questions had not come to the fore. I looked at all of these and I thought, we could pull something off here which would be the envy of the world. And one of the big issues in Canada, as we all know, is it is very difficult. It's the limited number of times when you can actually get the federal government, the provincial government, and a municipal government to work together. That was my personal challenge, trying to convince the governments to put on the table $1.5 billion. Not an easy thing to do. I wouldn't call it opposition, but the governments don't like spending this kind of money on something that was brand new. The title of the task force report was the Toronto Waterfront, the gateway to the new Canada. By the time the task force report went out to Prime Minister Chrétien, to Premier Mike Harris, and to Mayor Mel Esmond, the people of the City of Toronto was already on board. We fought for it. The Waterfront Corporation was put in place to do something very specific. It was to drive an economic model through an urban development process. That entity creates, let me call it, value, whether it's economic value or whether it's quality of life value. And I think that's exactly what the Waterfront Corporation is doing. It's creating value well in excess of the sum of its parts. It's hard to envision today what, let me call it, Spadina Avenue to the bottom of, let's say, the Red Path, what that looked like before. And I think all of us who started this can look back with a terrific amount of pride in terms of what has been accomplished, what we started, what our vision was. We have the ability to build what in essence is the first truly sustainable community, environmentally sustainable community in the world. And if we can do that, Toronto will become a truly first-tier destination. And that is in the hands of the Waterfront Corporation today.